Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football web show on Blog Talk Radio. I am your host, Jumpin' John Prevo, and with me are fantasy experts Evan Ostro and Vince Welch. So, how you doing, fellas? Welcome back to the show for another week. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing great.
Great, cool. Well, week one of the preseason, or first week's preseason games, are in the books. We're starting some preseason games tonight, and so football is definitely in full swing. And so let's get right to it. We got an hour for a show. We have a great show, a lot of topics to talk about. And I want to remind everyone that we do have a call-in number, which is 877-511-1024, and we do have a chat room in which we'll answer any questions that come through in the chat room. So let's kick it off. I know we'll start with one of my predictions last week. We did some rankings in top five. I threw Ryan Matthews up there. I thought he was going to have a big year, and there he goes and breaks his collarbone. So why don't we start with Ryan Matthews and what his injury is and what it means for the Chargers. So Vince, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, this is bad for the Chargers. I didn't think it was going to be as bad, but I saw today that he could be out till mid-October. I mean, that's a 6-week injury right there for a guy that was coming into a season that a lot thought was going to be his breakout season. So it's bad for him. It's bad for the team. It's a tough situation, especially they lost Vincent Jackson at the wide receiver position, so they have a little less depth there. So they're trying to lean on the running game a little bit more this year. It's definitely going to hurt the Chargers, and when he comes back, he's going to have to be careful running in the middle, trying not to re-injure that collarbone, because the collarbone is an injury that is very easy to re-injure. So bad news for the Chargers.
Yeah, especially he's only played in 30 games, and I saw some stat today. In those 30 games, he's been listed questionable in 15 of them. And 2 of them he was listed probable and didn't even play. I mean, he just can't stay away from the injury bug. It's a pretty bad injury. He's slipping in a lot of rankings, and it's your chance to go see what if Ronnie Brown can rejuvenate his career.
Yeah. That's they just got rid of Tolbert in the offseason, obviously, or didn't resign him, I guess would be the more correct term. And now they get the injury. So I read where he's looking to come back, and maybe he wants to play even that first regular season game, which is obviously really fast, and and it's actually going to lead into another topic that we're going to get to, and that's Adrian Peterson. Jerry Rice mentioned he thinks Adrian Peterson's coming back too early, as he did from one of his injuries. So what do you think about Ryan Matthews' chances of coming back early, and what do you think about both him and Adrian Peterson, whether they are coming back too early and should maybe rest more? So, Evan, why don't you start us off with that?
I guess I'll start with the AP. The AP, I definitely think he's rushing back too early. He's a freak of nature. He knows that, so he can probably handle it. I just think with such a fragile part of a running back, your ACL, I just think he's coming back way too early. He's just such a competitor. He's going to try and push it to the limit. I drafted Toby Gerhardt in one of my leagues, maybe a little too, middle late. Maybe that's a little too early, but I think he's rushing it too early. And especially, you figure the Vikings are going to be out of the playoffs pretty soon, and they're going to be extremely cautious with him. And with Matthews, it's just, I don't know, he's already so fragile. They're going to be extremely cautious with him. And the worst part is like we said with Beanie Wells last week, he's basically every game of his is a 4 o'clock game. So you're rolling the dice every time you lock him into a running back slot. Just a real fragile player.
Yeah, I agree with Evan. I think Adrian Peterson's definitely coming back way too early. He's already putting the pads on. A knee injury an ACL injury is not something a running back should be messing with. It takes a year to really recover fully from an ACL injury, and it's only been past the midway point of last season. So it's only been about 8-9 months. You really don't want to risk that. If he injures again, that's the end of his career, and I don't think that's worth messing with. With Ryan Matthews, you don't want to come back early, but it's a little different than an ACL injury because with the collarbone, it's not like that's going to ruin a guy's. Whereas a knee injury to a running back, that messes with your cutting, that messes with your speed. But he still should be careful because, like Evan said, he's very injury prone. And even if he's going to miss 6 weeks, the Chargers want it to only be 6 weeks. He can't come back and then be questionable every single week, missing games here and there. So that's how you look at that, at Matthews' injury versus Peterson's injury.
Yeah, I mean, lots of good points there, especially about the 4:00 games, and you mentioned how many weeks he's been on as listed as questionable or probable and not played even. So that's going to be a really tough row for the Chargers to go through until he's back full strength. So it's going to be an interesting year. Interesting to see how they play that with Matthews when he comes back and his exact role, what Ronnie Brown does. So there's definitely a lot to look for and a lot of strategy for when you obviously you're still going to pick Matthews. You may not obviously going to pick him maybe in the first or second round that you would have. He's going to drop down. So we'll get back to it and shows in future weeks about maybe where you are going to end up picking Matthews and what your strategy is around some of these injured running backs. So that'll be a pretty full topic to speak to. We're going to stick with running backs right now. Other big news, Cedric Benson signed with Green Bay. So, obviously that's not good for James Starks. Cedric Benson feels he can still be a 1,000-yard runner. So, Vince, why don't you start us off with Cedric Benson and what it means for Green Bay?
Yeah, this is a huge sign for Green Bay. I mean, James Starks only had 550 or so rushing yards last year. And Cedric Benson had a rough start to his career, but in the last 3 seasons, he's been a 1,000-yard back. He's 29 now. He's not a home run hitter by any means, but he's a guy that can get you 4.5 yards to carry easily, running off the tackles. He's not going to break it to the outside and go for 70 yards, but he's a very solid running back, and I see him having a 1,000-yard season, especially when you got Aaron Rodgers in that Green Bay passing attack in front of you, making things so much easier. I definitely see him having a 1,000-yard season and 8 to 10 touchdowns. He's going to be a good fantasy back this year.
I think a 1,000 yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns is a little high for him, especially in the goal line. They're using Kuhn a lot, and they're not going to completely abandon Starks, I don't think. But remember when Starks was with that play when they made that Super Bowl run and he was dominating, everyone was all over the Buffalo product, and now seems like a forgotten person. Benson will be a nice pickup. He's definitely worth drafting in your late rounds. But I don't ever see him being more than a flex in a week. He's going to get a very limited amount of touches and goal line touches. I don't even think they'll want to take the ball out of Rodgers, and Kuhn's really their goal line back anyway.
Well, I'll tell you, Vince has a pretty bold prediction there, and I'm going to write this one down. We want to maybe start keeping track of some of these predictions. But I like it. I like the prediction. I think traditionally the way Green Bay has used running backs, you're not going to get that production out of them. But if Cedric Benson's a step up from what they've had, plus Green Bay has, for some reason, had a history of injured running backs, so no one's really played a full season as the prime back. And James Starks has turf toe, so it's not guaranteed that he's going to be healthy. So I like the prediction. I think we're going to track it. I agree, Evan, the way Green Bay uses the running backs, I don't think he's a 1,000-yard, 8-touchdown type back, but, teams adapt. And if you have a Cedric Benson workhorse, and as you said, Vince, the lanes open up, maybe towards the goal line. So I'm going to like to see how that progresses throughout the year. So
I see him. I know they do like to use Kuhn in that goal line situation, but I see him being a better goal line back than Kuhn. They didn't have Cedric Benson as an option last year, so they had Kuhn in the goal line. I see Cedric Benson getting more goal line touches. I don't know.
But and they actually cut practice early one day this week because Kuhn was hurt and they were out of running backs. And Benson, there's a 3-day grace period, so Benson couldn't practice with them. We already talked about injuries, but I agree. Cedric Benson is a better goal line running back than Kuhn. So there you go. So Vince, stand by your prediction. I like it. All right, so keeping in the running back vein, let's talk a little bit about the Kansas City Chiefs. They actually looked pretty good on offense. Peyton Hillis ran wild during their first game. So let's talk a little bit about Peyton Hillis, a little bit about Jamal Charles, and what it means for both of them. And Evan, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's all over this Brian Daubee guy, the offensive coordinator, supposedly a great coordinator for running backs, and it's looked well. I mean, in the first preseason game, it was good to see Charles get hit. He looks. The only reason he would look like a better back coming off ACL is because he's had more than a full year, and it looks like they're going right back to the Thomas Jones, Jamal Charles day. Charles would get the big yards per carries, the big screen games, the long yardage. And Jones will get you more of your 3 yards up the middle, big in between the tackle runs, your goal line runs. But it can definitely work. Charles isn't a type of back. Charles is a type of back that works better with almost limited carries. So he needs a kind of a workhorse, and Peyton Hillis will definitely fit in that role for him and do a lot of the dirty work for Charles. Should be they're a real sleeper AFC West team this year.
Yeah, this is a match made in heaven for the Chiefs in the backfield. Hillis is your power. Charles is your speed. Hillis is your goal line and short yardage back. He's going to get you those tough first downs, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. When you're in the goal line area and he's getting hit by linebackers, he's a strong enough guy to push it into the end zone. And especially with Jamal Charles coming off knee surgery, that's something you want to limit his carries, and you have a very capable back to give those carries to. You don't have to be worried, we will risk hurting Jamal Charles by giving him the ball a lot. Well, no, you got a capable back in Peyton Hillis, so why not keep his carries down? It really is a perfect match. Gives the Chiefs such an advantage. And it's going to make that passing game even better when you can run the ball. Probably going to run the ball 25, 30, 35 times a game with these two.
Yeah, I read where Jamal Charles actually felt good about getting hit because he did bounce right back up. And I think the entire Kansas City staff was pleased with that. And he has only, when a couple years ago when he had his big year, he only averaged, I believe, like 15 carries a game. So limited touches are a little better for him. He's one that creates open space and thrives in it. He's not a ground mover that maybe Peyton Hillis might be more in the mold of. So I like the tandem. I think it's good things for the Chiefs. And Peter King was even talking about how good he thought the Chiefs looked, and we'll see if he makes a surprise prediction for the Chiefs this year. But so I think right now it's all looking good, and if and when they get Dwayne Bowe into camp, that'll even be a little bit better for him. So let's move on down to Rashard Jennings and Maurice Jones-Drew. Maurice Jones-Drew still holding out, and we got Rashard Jennings filling his role right now. So how well is he doing, and what's going to happen once the season starts? So Vince, why don't you start us off?
I have no idea, to be completely honest with you. The guy only had 84 carries last year. He had a decent yards per carry. I think it was around 4.2 or 4.4, something like that. So he's speedy. He can get you some yards. But honestly, MJD has dominated that backfield in the past. So Rashard Jennings needs to prove himself to the Jacksonville Jaguars organization, to the fans, and to the rest of the NFL, because we really don't know. I'm not going to sit here and make a prediction for him because I have no idea.
Yeah, that's probably what everyone's thinking with Rashard Jennings. Rashard Jennings is almost a leverage move by the Jaguars. If he plays really well, they can use that in negotiation. If he's playing pretty poorly, the MJD can use that on the side. In the end, though, I think MJD is too prideful of a guy to see someone taking his carries, taking his job. I think it'll probably go close to week 4 preseason, end of week 3, and things will get carried out. But Jennings is definitely a flyer. If this holdout goes longer, you might have a starting running back, and drafting in one of the last few rounds of a draft. So he might even be, if you did your drafts, check out him on waivers if he's available.
But he's looked good so far, and just it makes you, I'd like to hear your opinion maybe a little bit on the value of the preseason for someone like Rashard Jennings. We scoff sometimes at preseason games, but he's looked good so far, and how much do you take of that? And if you see him going into the second and third preseason games running as well as he did the first preseason game, what do you think that's going to mean? So let's expound a little bit on that, Evans. Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, the only thing, the value of him is if MJD comes into camp or once he ends his holdout, Rashard Jennings goes back to his primary backup role in a very minuscule, almost just handcuff value. But right now, Jennings, preseason's preseason. You never want to go too crazy after week one. But like you say, he looked like he's got some nice bursts. He's a pretty big back. They don't have Deji Kareem there anymore. So it's basically a sole job for him. But his value is so based on MJD because the second MJD signs the contract, he's back to just being a handcuff value, but a very important handcuff.
Yeah, there's no way MJD is going to stay out longer than 2 to 3 weeks. So if you do draft him, he'll get you some production in the first 3 weeks. But as soon as MJD gets back, he's back to 5 carries a game. Not really going to do much for you. You could be better with some other backups like a Peyton Hillis. This guy's not somebody that's going to come anywhere close to splitting carries with Maurice Jones-Drew, no matter how well he does in preseason.
And their offense isn't good enough for you to have rest too much value on Jennings as a backup. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, that's going to take us into our first break. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. We do have a guest call-in line at 877-511-1024. So feel free to call in, and we'll get you on after the break. And my name is Jumpin' John Prevo. I'm the host. And we'll get back in 2 minutes with fantasy experts Evan Ostro and Vince Wells.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Well, now put your fantasy skills and savvy to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Fantasy Football Evolution is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. The winner gets $25,000. Go to nextgenffe.com to sign up today. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Fantasy Football Evolution at nextgenffe.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95, and we'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com. Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. I am your host, Jumpin' John Prevo, and I want to remind everyone that we also do have a Kick-Ass website, which is www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. You're going to get division write-ups, you're going to get weekly articles, access to the Fantasy Judgment, access to a draft analyzer, win cruise for 2. Just great content, great weekly articles, updates, and for right now it's $9.95 until August 31st, and so you get 50% reduction till the end of the month. So Vince Welch and Evan Ostro, welcome back. And we've been talking about some topics that occurred during the week. We've been going on the running backs. Got a little bit more to go. And we're going to talk, Tim Tebow. And he's a quarterback, but it's Tim Tebow and the Jets running game, the Wildcat offense. So, Evan, why don't you start us off? Let's hear a little bit about how it's going with Tim Tebow, how good or poorly the Jets running game has been, and, what they're going to do to start the season.
Yeah, Tebow's only value you would have this year is backup quarterback if Sanchez ever gets hurt, and the fact that he could get some goal line touches just because, Sean Green's up there in one of the, I think, top 5 worst starting running backs. So Tebow was kind of brought in to be a bully in the goal line. I just don't see it. He could get your 30 yards, on a Wildcat day, on a good day. They even shut down practice to install their Wildcat package to make it even more eventful there. But, Tebow, there's no need to rush to judgment because no one's drafting him. So you can kind of go in a wait-and-see aspect. Unless Sanchez gets hurt, I see him having a very minimal role. He could sneak in a touchdown here every, 4 weeks. I just don't see it until Sanchez gets hurt.
I'm so sick of hearing about Tebow. It's ridiculous. Yesterday on SportsCenter, he turned 25, and they had a special top 10 athletes under 25. Give me a break. The guy's a backup quarterback. When is ESPN going to drop this? He's a backup quarterback. We don't need to see him all the time. I don't need to hear about Tim Tebow every day. Tell me things that matter. He's going to do some things in a Wildcat, but he's probably not going to be on the field more than 5 plays a game, if that. I could see Sanchez doing, because of this media frenzy, I could see Sanchez doing very poorly and the fans in New York calling for his head and calling for Tebow to come in and start after about 5 weeks, because that's just how it works with Tebow. Everyone seems to get behind him, even though he's terrible. I don't know. I don't think Tebow is very good. I don't think there's any reason to talk about it because we're not talking about, we're from Philly, and it's not like we're even talking about Nick Foles or Mike Kafka very often, so I don't really get it.
In New York.
Yeah. It's beyond me.
Yeah, we actually ended up having a moratorium on Tim Tebow talk last year during our Tuesday night show. So it does get old, and I know he's definitely definitely a celebrity, I guess. But as far as football talent, you're right. It's why are we talking about him as much as we are? So, Evan, I don't know if you have any other words for Tim Tebow, or if you're ready to just stop talking about him as most of us are. But feel free. If you have any left.
The crazy part is, at the end of I used him last year, and even on the 2 completion days, he still had 15 points. But until Sanchez gets hurt, there's nothing.
Well, and so there's an interesting statement from Vince in regard to Sean Green and his capabilities. Evan, how do you see Sean Green, and what do you think of their actual rushing?
Yeah, I think I was the one who said. I think he's one of the 5 worst starting running. His yards per carries is gross as it gets. I think he's one of the worst. He just cannot see a hole, hit a hole, and get you 8 yards. It's very rare where he puts up a very good, and even against bad defenses, his yards per carry is just so low. He's like he looks older than Cedric Benson. He's probably like 6 years younger than him.
Yeah, he's not a very explosive back at all. It's pretty unbelievable. The Jets offense manages to be awful, year in and year out, and their defense just carries them. Sanchez is not a good quarterback by any means. Sean Green does not supply a great running game, but they've been a pretty successful franchise in the past 5 years. A couple AFC championship appearances, and missed the playoffs by 1 game last year. I think they're going to have an eye-opening year this year, and by that I mean they're going to have a pretty bad year. I'm thinking 6-10.
Yeah, Bills are going to give them trouble.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope for the Jets either. They've definitely been on a downward spiral since their AFC Championship performance. So, we'll have to see. Not a lot of love lost down here for the Jets. So let's move on a little bit. Last topic for running backs is I want to talk a little bit about Tampa Bay. And there's been a lot of talk about Doug Martin. LeGarrette Blount was a favorite of our during the preseason of Judge Ray Jaffe's and myself last year. Had high expectations for him. Obviously disappointed, but let's hear a little bit, Evan, let's hear a little bit about Doug Martin versus LeGarrette Blount and what's happening down in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, definitely. Doug Martin, the two first-name guy. I'm huge on him. He's the only player in 3 of my leagues that I've had so far that is on all 3 of my leagues. I know it's scary going with a rookie running back, especially the fact I think Matthew Berry came out today that no running back has ever averaged 80-plus, rookie running backs ever averaged 80-plus yards in 10 games. That kind of scares you, but I'm done with the whole rookie mantra. I think it's a new age, especially shown by the last couple of years. Their O-line's unbelievable with Davin Joseph and Carl Nicks brought in. And Schiano's, it's all about the youth movement there, and I'm right on board with Martin. They got enough talent on the outside where they can't focus on him, and LeGarrette Blount will stay.
Sorry, I had to add that in. I mean, the love for Doug Martin is just oozing. Sorry,
I do love him. 3 down back, he can catch the ball, and I love my Boise State players.
Well, he's definitely performing in camp. But Vince, I don't know. Can we do any little point counterpoint? What about LeGarrette Blount? I mean, it seems like he's a little less than tank.
I mean, I'm not in love with him, but from what I've heard, from what Greg Schiano has said about him, Doug Martin is going to be the one getting the majority of the carries. The only thing that I will say is LeGarrette Blount is a gigantic back. So Doug Martin, yes, is going to get more carries in the middle of the field, but in the red zone within 5 yards from the goal line, I see LeGarrette Blount getting those finish them off carries, getting those touchdowns, kind of like Mike Allstott for them, way back in the day. But yeah, Doug Martin's a really good back. He had a great career at Boise State. I'm excited for his future. He's gonna be a top 10 running back in this league. And the Bucs are a young, up and coming young team, and that's a good little backfield right there. They're another team. That's another combination, and it's not the exact same, but it's kind of like Kansas City, with the power and the speed. But Doug Martin also has some power. But I don't know. He's definitely a good fantasy pick.
Well, it's 2 years in a row we've had some high expectations for Tampa Bay, so we'll see how it plays out. I'm actually pretty high on Tampa Bay. I mean, setting the bar pretty low based on what they did last year, but I think last year was a little bit of a fluke. They have a good team. Josh Freeman's a good quarterback. I need to see one more bad year from Josh Freeman to completely give up on him. No, I think he is a good quarterback, and I think he's got the team has a lot of faith in him. They got Vincent Jackson, throw the ball to. So things can only be looking up. So let's take it that way. So but again, it's we were very high on Tampa and their offense last year during the preseason. So hopefully it's just not a repeat of those expectations. So I think with the lower bar, we can't go wrong in predicting good things from them.
Different coach too. So.
Yeah, different coach. Coach.
Carl Nicks and Davin Joseph are great linemen. They're going to really help that run game.
All right. Well, so we're expecting big things from Tampa Bay, and I think we'll end this next segment before our break, and we'll talk a little bit about Chad Johnson. He's no longer Ocho Cinco, but
turn out the light, the party's over.
So Chad Johnson, I don't think I need to say a whole lot about what's going on with him. I'll let you guys, as the experts, go ahead. So Vince, tell us your thoughts on Chad Johnson.
Oh man, I'm not going to speculate what happened in his house, but I feel bad for Chad. I have a feeling his wife is a little bit of a drama queen. She's on Basketball Live. She's a reality star. And as long as we've known Chad in the NFL, he's been a goofy guy. He's been a little edgy guy, always getting on the commissioner's nerves. But I've always seen him as a guy that does it in good fun. Definitely don't see him as a wife beater. I feel terrible for him. I do, because I don't know. It's a sketchy situation. I hope Chad can find a new team. I saw this Dolphins thing coming. Philbin's a real strict play it by my way or the highway guy. So it might not have been a perfect fit for Ocho, but I hate to see him get cut like that and go out like that, because I don't think he's a bad guy. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm completely the other way. I mean, it was pretty sad on Hard Knocks watching Philbin just cut him in front of America's eyes. But, I mean, like you said, the writing's been on the wall. I mean, between the Twitter and then the interview, you can just tell he was irking Philbin. And when you're on hot water like that, the first thing you do, you're going to get the boot. And you know what? Truthfully, he's like Marcellus Wiley said, if he was if he was a star player, they would have kept him. But he's just not half the player what he used to be. And there's a reason winning teams, just don't tolerate players like Chad Johnson. If it wasn't this thing, it was going to be another thing 2 weeks down the road. They're just cutting their losses. And, I mean, like you said, Philbin was a hard-nosed. I mean, I think he was pretty open and understanding to him just from what you saw from Hard Knocks. But,
yeah.
I mean, it's just too much. I mean, after a point, he just becomes a circus clown.
I mean, I agree with you that he's not the player he once was. He's definitely not. He's not a great wide receiver, but he's solid. And I wasn't saying that he's not, a little tough to handle. I'm just saying for that one instance with his wife, I really think his wife was just playing that. I've seen her on Basketball Live. She was married to Antoine Walker before. She's kind of a gold digger type lady. I could easily see her being, just being full of crap. That's all I was saying. I'm not saying that.
Truthfully, do you really want Chad Johnson around Ryan Tannehill? I mean, I don't think you really want him around a young, growing quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just feel bad for Chad because I think in this instance he got played.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, Vince. I'm not sure we're going to run into too many people that have sympathy for Chad. I'm more in Evan's camp, and I don't have any sympathy for any of these. As a matter of fact, for the football players, a lot of them in general, I mean, they're getting paid a good amount to play a game that we'd all like to be able to do, and there's definitely inherent risks, injury risks to playing this, but they know that going in. So you get someone, especially a diva like Chad Johnson, who's always looking for the spotlight, and who actually has had domestic issues in the past. You're not going to find any sympathy here, but let's keep that thought and see how it goes throughout the season, because he definitely makes for good talk radio. So all right, we're going to go ahead and take another break. Remember, we do have a call-in number at 877-511-1024. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Primo, and this is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. So we'll be back in 2 minutes.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95, and we'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills into the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play. Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevo. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. We do have a Kick-Ass Fantasy website, www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. So we're back with Vince Welts and Evan Ostro, our Thursday night experts for the show. And let's get, we talked a little bit about Chad Johnson. He's out of his own account right now, and we're going to go a little bit more about tight end, a big part of Dallas's passing game, Jason Witten. And Jason Witten has a spleen injury, so
I think Joe is hurt. Angie Dundee, Ali's trainer, right next to me, is saying it. You may hear him. Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
All right, maybe not as dramatic as that, but, he's a big guy, not a joking matter, really, anytime you're talking about an internal organ. But, Vince, why don't you start us off? Jason Witten, how long is he going to be out? What's it mean for Dallas? I mean, I had big hopes. Well, I'm not a Dallas fan, but I thought maybe Dallas might be breaking through a little bit this year. So why don't you start us off on Jason Witten?
Well, he's definitely out the rest of the preseason, and they're uncertain for when they think he'll come back. With a spleen injury, this isn't an ACL, this isn't a foot injury, an arm injury. This is an organ. You got to be careful. I mean, you need your spleen. You need your spleen, or else you could die. You don't want to rush this guy back, but at the same time, he's Romo's. He's that rock in the middle of the offense. He's Romo's go-to guy, big target in the red zone. It would be rough for the Cowboys to miss this guy this season because he's a perennial Pro Bowler. I don't know though. I don't know much about spleen injuries, but I don't know. I don't know about spleen injuries, but I wouldn't rush him back. It's the guy's life you're talking about. It's not even his career. It's a little more important than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor and know how a spleen injury affects you, but I'm going to go on the side of, Jason Witten's a real tough player, real veteran player. He'll get himself healthy. He knows his body, and he's definitely not going to let it linger. They say he can miss the season opener, but I wouldn't even be surprised if he plays in it just because he wants to really play in that Giant game, and it's a really big season for Witten and Romo. They're expecting to do a lot of things, and I don't expect it to be a big injury. He's a real tough guy. I mean, everyone remembers him running for like 15 more yards after his helmet pops off. He'll be back sooner than later.
Toughness doesn't have much to do if your spleen's failing. Toughness is worthless at that point. So I saw today on ESPN that there's actually a possibility that he'll need surgery, and that would sideline him the whole year. I would like to say I don't think that's going to happen, but again, me and Evan aren't doctors, and I don't know. I would be careful drafting him, though. He's still a great tight end, and you almost got to take him, but it's a big risk.
Yeah, it's a shame that it happens, especially when it's something that could be more life-threatening. But obviously hoping for the best for him. He's a big part of the Dallas passing game, so I'm sure they want him back as soon as possible. But just hoping that they take a little bit of caution with it. So let's move on. Talk a little bit about running backs. Talk a little bit about wide receivers. Big stars of the game these days, quarterbacks. And We'll start with one who's not quite a star, but high expectations in San Francisco. They thought they should make the Super Bowl last year. And I just want to know, is there a quarterback controversy in San Francisco? Colin Kirkpatrick played pretty well when he went in, so, what does it mean in San Francisco? So, Vince, why don't you start us off?
I don't think there should be a quarterback controversy. They went to the NFC Championship last year, and while Alex Smith isn't isn't a Peyton Manning type player, he's a guy that with that type of defense, I mean, they have the best linebacking core in the NFL with LeVar Bowman, holding it down back there. But I mean, he's solid. He's going to get you yards. He can throw accurate passes. He's not great, but he's not bad. I don't see why you would mess that up, especially with Frank Gore, and now they got Brandon Jacobs. They got some weapons in there for him. Vernon Davis had a great year last year. No, I don't think it's too much of a controversy.
Can Alex Smith get a break, man? I mean, I can't believe we're talking about Colin Kaepernick after he just beat Drew Brees in the conference championship game in the fourth quarter, drive for drive. I don't think there's any competition. It's just they're developing a pretty good quarterback behind him. But let's stay off Alex Smith back for a second. I mean, everyone's been all over him, and then he gets a team, a Kyle Williams fumble away from a Super Bowl, and who knows what would have happened. But I definitely don't think there's a competition at all. This guy did beat Drew Brees in a little bit of a shootout, so let's stay off him.
Yeah, no, definitely stay off his back.
All right, let's move on out of San Francisco and into Seattle, where we got possibly another quarterback controversy brewing, and we got three quarterbacks with starting potential there. So, what's happening in Seattle?
I mean, you never know with Pete Carroll. He's a pretty crazy, charismatic guy. But you got to follow the money in the NFL, and they paid Matt Flynn way too much money not to play him. But, I mean, you're never surprised at anything Pete Carroll does. I mean, he's bringing Will Ferrell to practice at USC. He's drafting Russell Wilson. I still think Matt Flynn's going to do well enough for them, especially with that good of a running game, and they got a good defense. It's a tough place to play. I think Matt Flynn's a lot better than what everyone's comparing him to Kevin Kolb. I think he's a lot better player than him. I think he'll do well enough that he'll ride the ship at least for this year. You gotta follow the money.
Matt Flynn definitely is the starting quarterback as of now. There's no question of that. But Russell Wilson was quoted as saying that he thinks he is closer to that starting spot and that he really wants it. So, I mean, you got a guy that's talented, there's a first-round pick, that's working hard, working to get that starting spot. I'm with Evan. I don't think he'll get it unless we see Flynn screw up royally, which you never know. It could happen. We've only seen him play in that one game in the NFL where he set a lot of records in Green Bay last year, filling in for Aaron Rodgers in the last game of the season. So as of now, Matt Flynn, I don't think he has too much to worry about, but if he's playing poorly by week 5, week 6, and they only have 1 or 2 wins, I wouldn't be surprised to see Russell Wilson thrown into the mix.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Matt Flynn's going to start the year. Not that he needs to look over his shoulder necessarily, but if he's not doing well, I don't think Pete Carroll will have any qualms about putting the rookie in. So. I think we're possibly seeing Russell Wilson sooner rather than later. Leaves Tavares Jackson as the odd man out, but I think we always kind of knew that. So, all right, let's move on a little bit to Arizona, and got a couple quarterbacks apparently in Arizona. I say apparently because neither have really set the world on fire. So,
do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah, they're trying, but they're not doing right now. So what's happening in Arizona, and does anyone really want the job?
This is a pretty insignificant quarterback battle because either way you slice it, they're both pretty bad. I mean, Kevin Kolb's been in the league 5 years now. If he was meant to be good, he would be good. He's already had 4 years to develop, get his game going. He hasn't looked good in preseason appearance. Skelton didn't look good either. Now they're talking about maybe Tavares Jackson, the trade block, They're talking about maybe having him come in. And then what, you have 3 awful QBs? I don't know, pretty tough situation down in Arizona. They're both going to probably play a lot in the regular season because they're both probably going to do poorly and they're going to be switching back.
Yeah, I think the big thing here, like as we just came from the Seattle to the Arizona, is Seattle's got a great O-line, Russell Okung's healthy, and Arizona's O-line is horrible. I mean, Kevin Kolb couldn't stand in the pocket to save his life. I think that's the main problem here. Cobb's much smaller of a quarterback. Skelton's a big guy, 6'4", 6'6" guy. So throw it out to Fordham right there. But I think, this whole job rests on who can get the ball to Larry Fitzgerald. Skelton will stay healthier. I think he's going to win out this job. I mean, Cobb's already got the rib problem. Whoever is the quarterback there has got to take shots, and Skelton's just got the bigger frame and bigger arm.
Yeah, Skelton's the favorite right now as far as the coaching goes, too, in camp. I think they have him above Kolb after that preseason game.
All right, so before we take a break, we got actually a chat question real quick, and then we want to ask you guys, and we'll start off with you, Vince, but it's a redraft PPR, and so the big question, and it's actually a very good question, and that's McFadden or Forte. So, Vince, who would you go with, McFadden or Forte, and how far apart are they?
How far apart? Very close. They're very close. The only reason I think they're that close, though, I think McFadden's a good amount better than Forte, but the reason I say they're very close is because McFadden's been injury-prone his whole career, and if he gets injured, then Forte is obviously the guy bringing more value. They're both going to get a lot of carries. Forte's really Chicago's only running back that's a threat, and in Oakland, the quarterbacks are Carson Palmer and Jason Campbell, so they're going to have to rely on that running game a lot. They're very close. I would have McFadden slightly above Forte.
Yeah, the key part of that question, though, was PPR, and PPR, Forte is a much valuable player. He catches a lot of balls out of the backfield, big player in the screen game. His only knock is in the standard league. He doesn't get any goal line touches. But in a PPR league, you want receptions, and Forte is much better of a receiver, and he stays healthier. And every year he's been in the league, he's had something over 1,200 or 1,400 total yards just because he's a huge player, huge receiver out of the backfield. In the PPR, he's much more valuable.
All right, so there we go. That was for Jim Struble on our chat line. So I'm your host, Jumpin' John Priva. We're going to take another 2-minute commercial break, and then we'll be back on the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football show on Blog Talk Radio.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today. Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
All right, welcome back to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and Evan Ostro and Vince Welts are our fantasy experts for our show tonight. And I'm going to throw in my 2 cents. I'm going to go with Darren McFadden, slightly higher than Matt Forte. That's a little bit of surprise, a little bit of break of how I normally rate, but I like his upside and have to hope that his injury history is over. We're going to go back with quarterbacks and with some controversies and battles in camp, and we'll start with David Garrard, who injured his knee, and he was slated for the starting role in Miami, and now he's going to miss some time. So, Vince, why don't you start us off with David Garrard and what's happening there?
Yeah, I feel bad for Garrard. He's out for the season. Probably his career's over. He sat out last season, too. He was trying to make a comeback this year. And he's a guy that's been a class act in the NFL for a while. I think he had 1 or 2 Pro Bowl years. Good quarterback. Could have done good things for Miami. But the starter here, it's between Matt Moore and Tannehill, but I see Matt Moore being the starter. He had a very good finish to the year last year for the Dolphins. Earned the respect of his teammates, which was the biggest thing. He had that locker room respect. He was definitely the leader last year. So I see him coming in and starting. I think it'll be a good thing for Tannehill, who came in labeled a project. He was the 8th overall pick, but it'll be a good thing for him to sit, learn the system, watch from the sidelines. It'll be very beneficial for Tannehill, who is their quarterback of the future, to sit on the sidelines rather than get pummeled in his first year, and let Matt Moore lead this team to an 8-8 record about.
Yeah, I feel bad for Garrard. He seems like a great guy from Hard Knocks, but it's all about Tannehill. Tannehill. They drafted him too high, brought in his coach from college. He knows the system. There's no way that absolute latest that he's not starting by week 5. He could even get the job from day one. Everyone's going with the rookie quarterback. The public outcry is going to be too much. The Hollywood owner is going to fall into it. And I think he's just a better athlete. He just gives the team a little more hope. Matt Moore might have been the locker room guy last year, but it's all about Tannehill. He looks like a great athlete. He knows the system. You got to roll the dice with him. You draft him too high not to.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, actually. I thought Garrard would be the starter going into the season. Obviously, with his injury, that's going to throw that out of whack. And I think they like Garrard better than Matt Moore. For some reason, they're not as high on Moore, so I think they may end up rolling the dice with Tannehill. So it's probably how it's going to go. Sorry, Vince, did you have something?
I disagree. I think a lot of times you see rookie quarterbacks come in too early and start, and they get roughed up, and it ruins them. I think it would be way smarter for the Dolphins to have him sit out a year. And Matt Moore, they're not going to win the Super Bowl this year anyway. There's no reason for it. Matt Moore's a very capable guy to come in and fill in. I think he's gonna start and play the majority of the season.
It's 2012. You got to throw the kid into the fire.
All right, so we'll do one more quarterback that may need a little help, and that's Christian Ponder. We talked with AP and what his value to the Vikings was, but Christian Ponder, I think, is looking a little more poised in the pocket, maybe throwing a little bit better. So let's get a little bit of thoughts on Christian Ponder, and if he can, maybe lead the Vikings a little bit, especially if AP is going to miss some time. So, Evan, why don't you start us off on Christian Ponder?
Yeah, Christian Ponder, he was drafted a little bit higher than everyone thought at FSU last year. But you know what? He's got a full season now. He's had to have grown a lot. And you know what? Truthfully, they're going to be down a lot. So he's going to throw up some, he's done it before. He's thrown up some pretty gaudy numbers. He's going to have his picks, no doubt, but he's a mobile kid who can make plays outside the pocket. And they're going to be down a lot, and they're going to let him sling it. And especially with AP banged up, he's going to have to sling it. They drafted Khalil to protect him. you got to see what the kid's got. He's going to have his opportunities, but his picks will be there too. Percy Harvin will be his main benefactor.
Yeah, I was not high on Christian Ponder coming out of college. I thought everyone was overrating him. Didn't think he was going to be that good of a quarterback. But he actually proved me wrong last year in his rookie season. He didn't do great, but he played pretty well. I mean, for a rookie, he played very well, filling in for after Donovan McNabb did absolutely awful in the beginning of the year. He played way better than McNabb did. Actually looking pretty good this preseason. And like Evan said, the Vikings are going to be pretty bad. They're going to be down in a lot of games. And Evan's absolutely right. They're going to be slinging it. And Percy Harvin's a great guy to lean on for a young quarterback. He's a very fast, very speedy wide receiver. Can throw him some bubble screens to get it going in the beginning of the games. And if AP does come back healthy, that'll only help him. But we'll see. I think Ponder does look like he has a little bit of a bright future here.
All right, so one more thing real quick. Got about 5 minutes left in the show, and a team that interests me that I've had a lot of followed a lot is Matt Ryan, quarterback down in Atlanta. And I know it's only one preseason game, but what do you think about the Atlanta passing game? And we're going to see more than we did last year. So, Vince, why don't you start us off?
The Atlanta passing game. Wow, that's a lot of firepower. A lot of firepower. Julio Jones coming into his second season. He's on his way to being one of the best receivers in the NFL, has all the physical tools. He's tall, he's fast, has great hands. Roddy White was a top 5 receiver last year. Tony Gonzalez is getting up there. He's getting older, but he's still short-handed, still a nice target in the red zone. And Matt Ryan, while he's always a top 10 quarterback, he's not great, but he's a guy that has the capability to throw the ball down the field, and he's very smart. He uses his head. He knows the system well. I see this offense putting up huge numbers, top five passing attack in the NFL without a doubt.
Hot Atlanta, man, hot Atlanta. Like you've been said, they got the threats on the outside, no doubt. And their running game last year at the last 4 or 5 weeks is going to the playoffs. It was pretty deserted, man, and Turner was getting subbed out a lot for Snelling and Jaquiz because they're better receivers out of the backfield. This is kind of Matt Ryan's year. This is kind of Matt Ryan's Eli Manning year last year. He's got to prove where is he? Is he elite quarterback? Is he average quarterback? I think it's officially his team now. And, the only thing they really got to prove on is they're a completely different team once they get out of the Georgia Dome. Once they get out of a dome, their road record's horrible. Their offense looks so much slower. Matt Ryan's really got to grow up in that aspect.
Yeah, I agree with Evan. That was definitely a great way to put it. This is Matt Ryan's year to prove if he is elite or if he is, just a good quarterback. Because he does have that potential to be elite, and there's no reason he can't be. And this year is the year to prove it.
Another thing, if we're going to go with the Matt Ryan team, which I definitely think it is, Jaquiz Rodgers, man. I mean, if they're going to play a lot, he's a great receiver out of the backfield, real shifty, real explosive. He's kind of really fading in drafts.
There you go. I've been a proponent of Atlanta and their passing game. I think maybe this is the year that finally pans out. So I expect big things out of Atlanta as well. And while Matt Ryan may not be a top 5 quarterback, he's definitely a top 10. And he may be one of those quarterbacks that exceed expectations and help you win your fantasy league. So I just want to remind everyone, we've got a few minutes left. This is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. We have a website, www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. Until August 31st, we are 50% special, $9.95 for the year. We have cheat sheets. We have divisional lineups. We have the number 1 rated draft tool. We have customized draft sheets and trade analyzer. So subscribe today. I also want to remind everyone that the Fantasy Fest down in Atlantic City coming up in 2 weeks, the Kick-Ass Fantasy team is going to be there. So come on down, Atlantic City, meet and greet, and our on-air host, and should be a great time. So we've got about a minute left. So Vince, Evan, just want to wrap up and thank you for your time and see if there's any last thoughts from you guys.
Nothing much. Have a great time in AC. I wish I could join you guys.
Yeah, nothing much. Still seeing if I can make it to AC on Sunday. It's going to be close, but if I'm there, I'll see you guys there.
Okay, I'm actually going to be missing as well. Got a family vacation that I'm looking forward to. So, but the rest of the Kick-Ass crew is going to be there. Some on just Saturday, some on just Sunday, but most on both days. So it should be a great time. And Atlantic City is always fun. So, again, this is our Kick-Ass Fantasy Football web show on Blog Talk Radio. We have a show coming up on Tuesday night at 9. So tune in for your weekly dose of fantasy football. And I'm your host, Jumpin' John Primo. Thank you very much.
Are you ready for some football?
All right, guys, we're done. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you next week.